Well, good morning, world. Back in Dallas on a gloomy, rainy day, trying to interact and get across to you guys. I think we missed last week. I may have been in transit, but thank you for your kind notes and your messages from across the globe. Your encouragement is what keeps us going. We thought of trying to shake it up a little bit and today try to embark on a new venture. We've gotten many queries over the days about trying to put an umbrella around our different random thoughts and musings. I'm what you would call an anthropological motivator, so I try to connect the dots of human history, and in the process, maybe I go all over history, so I do apologize for that. But the general umbrella under which every one of our messages would work would be what we call the tri-dimensional nature of man. We do believe that there are three dimensions. We are mental, physical, and spiritual. The mental acumen is the thought process, the physical is your actual participation in the world, and the spiritual is that X factor that guides us. We're frustrated most often because we try to eke out an existence in a two-dimensional way. This morning, in the process of researching a little bit for this new set of narratives, I stumbled across a book written by Mortimer Adler about Aristotle made easy. Adler, of course, was that great person from Chicago, passed away some years ago, a man who initially dropped out of school, went on later to become an academic powerhouse, and was instrumental in that volume of work called The Great Books of the Western World. Adler, in trying to make Aristotle easy, actually said that Aristotle was one of the first people to have come up with the concept of the tri-dimension of man. Because Aristotle put it differently. Aristotle said that man's three dimensions are, one, he's a maker, in the sense he produces things. Amongst all the species on planet Earth, man is the only one capable of building. Now, I know there's some skeptics who are watching saying, what about a bird building a nest? And those are what you call superficial similarities between man and other animals. But in reality, when you look at the history of time, right from the initial understanding of gravity to putting a man on the moon, it's what man has done, and man has historically been a maker. This is what we call, or Aristotle called through Adler, productive thinking. So this week, or the weeks ahead, as you look at your own goals, your own strategies, and you look at that first dimension of yourself as a maker, the physical attributes. What are some of the productive thoughts that go through your mind? How do you get those productive thoughts? Do you follow thought leaders? Do you subscribe to podcasts? I, for one, am constantly listening to information that is good, clean, pure, powerful, and positive on my way to work. This morning, I was listening to the great Adrian Rogers. Man, I don't know how many times I've heard him, but I never tire of the simplicity with which he gives me an application to be productive. So the first dimension is this maker dimension, what we call productive thinking. Now remember, I'm using the words of Aristotle, made easy through Mortimer Adler, and trying to combine it with the mental, physical, and spiritual attributes. So don't get lost in this. Ultimately, there'll only be those three dimensions. And we're going to ask you to track on one of those dimensions. So this week, maybe you want to focus on productive thinking. The second attribute is man is a knower. And by knower, we mean someone who is in the theoretical thinking. What do you want to know? What are the horizons? As most of you know, I tend to rely on my faith more than most things. And in the good book, in Jeremiah 33:3, there is a verse which jumped out at me many years ago, and it was, "Seek unto me, and I will show you great and mighty things you cannot comprehend." Which means outside the realm of human comprehension, of human knowledge, begins God's wisdom. But that doesn't limit man from wanting to know things that are spiritual, wanting to know things that are relational, wanting to know things that are personal, wanting to know things that deal with love, with raising children. So if the first dimension is a maker, which is productive thinking, another dimension is this thing called knowing, which is theoretical thinking. There is a third dimension, which is doing, and that is practical thinking. No matter how much you know, no matter how much you aspire, no matter how much you're willing to make, there comes a time where the rubber meets the road. In my consulting assignments, I remember in the mid 90s and early 90s where the catchphrase in every corporation was, think outside the. And if I pause there, almost everyone who's watching this, either the replay on Instagram, Facebook, wherever you're watching from, everybody can complete that statement. So I'm going to say it again. Think outside the, and all of you in your mindset box. And the reason is we were given this mandate that change exists in this extra perception. But as I've traveled around the world, I met a lot of people who were just standing around doing nothing. And when I asked them what you're doing, they said, we're thinking outside the box. Maybe it's time to get back in the box and pray for a bigger box. That may be a more practical way to deal with your days. So the maker within us is productive. The knower within us is theoretical, selective. But the doer within us becomes practical. Or when I decided to write my first book, the maker within me wanted to just write volumes and volumes, which I thought was brilliant. The thinker within me, the knower within me, sought out other areas to gain input from. The practical side of this hit a wall when one day I had all the information but none of the input. Which means sometimes we get so caught up in our ability to do that we don't stop and know. Do you see where I'm going with this thought process? It's not circular logic. It actually intersects in a very profound way. So this week, categorize your life into the productive attributes. What is it that you're willing to absolutely make? Something new, something unique, either of yourself, your environment, your job, your career, your family, your marriage, your relationships. Most of you have been very, very kind and gracious during this time, especially most of what I have done in the last couple of weeks has related to my father. This morning I was talking to him and I said, Dad, what are you doing now? He said, Son, I'm following your advice. I said, that's always humbling. But I said, what do you mean you're following my advice? He says, I decided to make a list of the things I learned from you and we learned from each other over the course of those 10 days. How sweet, how innocent, yet how profound. The man is 84 and he's taking to heart that you can just go through life imagining all the wonderful things that happened, or you can grow through life documenting them, actively participating in them so that some good will come out of it to someone else. So that's the overarching, maybe the synopsis of what we will slowly try to unpack. So to recap, ask yourself, this week, are you going to focus on being a productive thinker? What do you make? Are you going to be a practical thinker? What do you do? Or are you going to be a selective or a theoretical thinker? What do you know or want to know? My mentor, Zig Ziglar, would always say, you have to plan to be the right kind of person, prepare to do the right kind of thing, and then expect to have all that you have to offer. Again, 3 dimensions: plan, prepare, expect, be, do, have. If anything you take under the sun will fall under that category. In fact, let me leave you with a thought that'll maybe make your head spin or force you to track, and that is this. It is very easy to go through life asking yourself how things work. It may even be a step further to ask yourself, what is it? But sometimes it takes a great deal of introspection to ask yourself the agency question. Why does it exist? Why don't we do that for the prime motivators in our life? We can find out what goals we need to set. We can actually find a goal-setting system and ask ourselves how to set them. But do we ever sit in the quietness of our own moment and ask ourselves, why do I need this? Very quickly you'll realize that maybe you want things you don't need to impress people you don't know by buying things you don't have and borrowing money you haven't actually earned. So let me combine it with the same 3 statements. And I'm repeating this often enough so that we'll all track. 3 dimensions of man. The maker within us has to be productive. The doer within us has to be practical. And the knower within us has to be theoretical. Hopefully that gives you some insight, some amount of arrows in your quiver, so as you shoot, you'll hit the bullseye. God bless you all, and we'll see you down the road.